I think so, or somebody will. All
Oh,
right.
from myself directly, you mean?
Yeah, I think so. All right, we're going to say welcome to Open Tech Will Save Us number 8. Number 8. So we have a whole bunch of people to talk to you tonight. I'm going to go from the top of my screen. We've got Hubert. Hubert, you know him as Uhoreg. He works on all kinds of things, but actually he's been doing a lot of work on encryption lately. And in particular, he works for Element, and he's going to talk through some of the state of the art of encryption, and maybe bring that back a little bit to how it relates to his work at Matrix. We also have Mohammed Radwan. So he is here from Tactical Tech, which is a super cool agency in Berlin. And they have been working on something called the Glass Room. What it is, it's a way of combating misinformation, and also really highlighting how big of a problem misinformation is. But I can't do it justice, so I'm going to let him talk it through. And we're going to have Popi from Chatons. I think that's how you pronounce it. This is a Framersoft initiative, and it's basically a coordinated set of hosters, and they're doing cool work. Again, I will let him introduce it because I'm sure I'm not doing it exact justice. But first of all, we're going to hear from Mohammed. So take it away.
Great, thanks, Ben. Just audio check. Does it sound all right? Yeah, great, cool. Great. So what I'm gonna do right now is I'm just gonna open up and share my screen with everyone. I'm looking for my photos. There we go. Okay. Great, and hopefully that's popping up here in just a little bit.
Yeah, we can see it now. Thank you.
Great. Cool. So to get us started, just to mention, just introduce myself one more time. Mohammed Radwan, based here in Berlin. For the moment, there's been some moving around recently with everything going on, but I'm the Glass Room project coordinator. I wanted to thank the Matrix team actually for inviting us to take part. Actually, we're really big fans of Riot, I guess now Element, Tactical Tech, been using it for quite a while. So it's cool to connect with the community that we actually rely on. So what I want to do is just briefly introduce the organization, give you guys some kind of background about the project itself, and then dive right into this latest edition of the Glass Room, which is called the Misinformation Edition. So I'm going to do it kind of like Pechakucha style for the first bit, and then move on and kind of do a live kind of navigation around the virtual exhibition. So I'll end up sharing my screen of the actual virtual exhibition. Great. So the first bit is just about Tactical Tech, who we are. We're an international, actually, NGO that explores and mitigates the impact of digital technologies on society. It's kind of the one-liner there. Essentially, our mission is to give the resources people need to make sustainable change in their digital lives. We encourage online privacy, autonomy, and a creative use of technology. So in the past, I mean, it's been going for like 16 years now. I haven't been there that long, but in the beginning when they were working with open source for nonprofits, but then soon after they moved on to info activism and then digital security. A lot of people know the kind of flagship project of that time, which was called Security in a Box. And now we focus on quantified society. And that's kind of just the effects of tech on us as individuals and communities from a more holistic viewpoint, looking at everything from education, environmental, political, social, and economic dimensions around tech on us as individuals. And so, and so the biggest areas besides the Glass Room, I just want to briefly mention, there's this project called Exposing the Invisible. Very cool project, which looks at the tools and techniques used by experienced investigators, and then making those more accessible to people who feel motivated to start their own investigations. It's a sort of citizen investigation toolkit during this time of abundant information, but without this corresponding kind of magnitude of verification, right? Another very cool project is Data and Politics, and this looks at, excuse me, politically active groups around the globe that use tools and techniques from marketing, statistics, psychology, to advance their agendas and promote their electoral campaigns and to influence voters. Actually, my colleagues call it the influence industry, right? These political groups end up amassing and leveraging data on voters, increasingly adopting this commercial approach to data collection and this data-centric business model, which has kind of transformed countless other domains and has become a modern day politicking. So this project aims to explore which political entities are using what types of data, how the various methods work, and how they're affecting democracies worldwide. I think we all kind of have a little bit of background on that. It really goes deep into this. There's a few other projects I'm not going to get into now. One about youth and technology, one about data and activism. They're also very cool. I invite you to check out the website. I'm just going to jump right here into the Glass Room, the actual project that I'm going to present here in a bit. So this started back in 2016, so it's about 4 or 5 years old now. And it's first started as this large-scale exhibition, which presents a collection of art, design, tech objects that explore data privacy and our relationship with these technologies and platforms that we're using in our everyday lives. What really brings people into this exhibition, when people could go to exhibitions, is presenting these objects and that illustrate the concepts in a non-speculative way. I think that's probably the coolest part. When you walk in, you see it presented in all these unique formats, and it's really things that are actually happening. So we call it art, but that's a key word. It's really non-speculative, things that are actually happening, and often without the knowledge of the general public. So the project started with this big exhibition, the one in front of you here in Berlin. Later, Mozilla caught wind of it, and they're like, "Yo, we want to really support you guys." And so they ended up sponsoring also 3 other large exhibitions that took place in London, New York, and about exactly a year from now in San Francisco. And that was the latest one with about 50 different digital and analog objects. It's just a few pictures of, so I think this one's Berlin. Oh, this one's London. Here we go, San Francisco. So this is the latest one, right there on Mission Street, kind of downtown San Francisco. Yeah, and so basically the Glass Room sparked this global conversation and becoming in this international sensation, partners from all around the world repeatedly requesting a version that they can present to their own communities, much like we're doing here today. And so in response to that incredible demand, we created a smaller version, kind of like a pop-up version that was low cost, it's portable, we can send it anywhere around the world. And around the world, it went indeed. As a matter of fact, it's been hosted about 170 times in 40 countries in just the past 2 years. I mean, we estimate more than 200,000 visitors to all of these different events. So it's been quite successful. The first one, I just want to give you an idea of the first one that we did. This is an image of it, I think, in Portugal. And this one was called the IoT edition. It was a huge hit and touched on these fundamental issues of privacy and our data in this playful, non-threatening, kind of non-technical manner that bridged the gap with, you know, your everyday layperson, these seemingly complex issues. And so this was the second one here, though, was this one that I want to show you guys in a second, which was called the Misinformation Edition. And I'm just going to try and switch over now my screen to my browser. So just if you would give me a few minutes, I'm going to go ahead and do that. Just going to stop sharing here and then give it one more try. Let's see. This is my Brave tab. Just going to go over here to the actual browser, and I'm just going to be bouncing around now. Oops, I'll take it. So here we get, here's the actual Misinformation Edition. is a landing page for the online exhibition. And basically, this edition is essentially an exhibition about the way in which tech and social media platforms are shaping information that we see, consume, and interact with in our daily lives. So what that means for us as a society, I guess, and the choices that we're making. We developed this content for two key audiences. One was a wide spectrum of adults who usually come and visit, not particularly specialists of this field, but just maybe interested in the topic. And the second is for a younger group of people who are now particularly exposed to these new trends and shifts in the way in which this information landscape is being formed. And as we developed this content, we looked at two formats. One that we use in the IoT edition that I just mentioned, which is these large posters that we hung up on walls in a physical space. And the second one was a series of apps and kind of digital assets that we would put on tablets and set up on tables where people can come up and interact with. Of course, this was back in the day, and now here we are with the COVID reality, and that's been a lot more difficult, as you can imagine. And so we've gone ahead and adapted this for the first time, taking it to virtual space, which is what you're looking at right now. What I want to do is take you through all these different objects just very briefly. The idea here is that, this is really like a self-learning immersive experience. So I'm not going to go through everything in detail, but I invite you to take your time at your own leisure and, go up on the website. It's open to everyone, and just check it out on your own. So really, as we developed the content for this, these three key themes emerged. And the first one is around the central theme of misinformation, right? So we developed this app that we had previously made. It was called Fake or Real. The first one was about smart devices, whether, it pops up and it shows you, and you got to guess if it was a real object or not. We kind of went with that kind of theme again. And it says, fake news, but we actually address that term and how problematic it is. But that's the first one. I'm going to just pop over there and show you what it looks like. It was that first tab that I had on. So you have these series of questions basically, and we actually are calling it more misinformation than fake news. So here's like one, it talks about COVID, but basically you go in here and you kind of answer the question, tells you if you're right or wrong, and then it gives you this explanation. So sometimes there, it's different media, and even we're talking about this one, for example, here, which is the Extinction Rebellion using a deep fake, and so we're talking about how actually there's an activist form of information. So it's not necessarily all misinformation or disinformation. We're introducing concepts like culture jamming in this instance. So alongside of that, we have another app that was developed by some students at a design school that we worked with over the course of the development of this edition. The group was called Density Design, and they're based in Milan. So they developed this app called Double Check. It explores similar areas to Fake or Real, except it looks more at like image manipulation. I'm just going to go through here and just kind of show you really quick as well. So this is just the introduction pages. And I want to take you also so you can just take a look at how these series of questions are set up. Yeah, here we go. And there it is. Okay, so it's quite similar to Fake or Real, but then, yeah, like I said, so here we have this image of, I believe it's Hong Kong, exactly, and you're going to try and figure out which one is the right one. And so I'm just going to choose anything, and I'm wrong here. And then again, it gives you some kind of explanation. It takes a while to pull up here, but it looks like it's on the way. That's right. Talks actually about how it's in a different location altogether. Okay, so basically, the only, they've got these nice features where on the left side you can see kind of like you're under this time pressure to answer the question, And you can see also on the right side, they have, it says 2 out of 12. So it's about 12 questions. And yeah, again, another attempt here to really kind of highlight these different techniques that people have been using online to spread all kinds of misinformation. So the third app, we've been calling it app, these digital assets are actually web-based now. We used to have them on the tablets, as I mentioned before, but now they're accessible through the URLs that we provide. And the third one here is a little bit different now, and this is called Drop in the Ocean. I'll go over there and also check it out. Okay, oops. Somehow it's still loading, but it's not, no, it's not in the best shape. I'll just give it a reload there. Hope it all pops out. And as it's loading there, I'll just try and give it a quick explanation here. So this was one that we did actually at Tactical Tech for the 2019 big exhibition in San Francisco by one of our colleagues on the data and politics team that I mentioned earlier. And this is based around what is called the Ocean Test. In other countries, they call it Big Five, but the Ocean is an acronym, right? And it's this, this well-established psychometric test used by psychologists. And I'm guessing some people might have some background on this, but through a series of different questions, this test pretty much gives you this psychological profile around 5 major characteristics: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And as you may know already, this is a type of test used by Cambridge Analytica when they ended up collecting a lot of information on millions of people around the world, and the basis of the political campaigning and targeted ads used in elections around the world, including probably the last one, but we haven't heard much. But there's a 2016 one that came out later, and it was also revealed through a documentary the extent to where they worked all around the world, including Brexit and at least a dozen other countries. So this app, usually it's not showing, unfortunately, here. Oh wait, I think they've switched it up a little bit. Okay, that's why. But yeah, so basically I'm just going to go through here, and you can see these questions on the left. As I mentioned, so it asks you a series of these questions. I'm just going to go in here and answer. It says, I'm indifferent to the feelings of others. And I got, if that's moderately inaccurate, or if it's true or not. And I'm just going to go through all of these questions. As I get angry easily. I avoid difficult reading material. And as you can see on the right side over there, it's starting to create a visual of the profile that it's creating for me, right? Based on these answers. So I'm just going to go down and just answer the rest of the questions. And you can see here it's actually doing a comparison of about 2,435 people and the selected age groups. Okay. So once you get to the bottom and you answer all the questions, I'm just going to do that really quickly. Here we go. One more. A few more. Okay. And it says, I make friends easily. I love children. Oh, there's a lot more questions. Okay, I think they added a few more. Great. And here we go, finally. Okay. Somehow. Okay. Well, maybe I'll move on from here. I think there's a few bugs, actually, for the first time. I haven't seen this before. What ends up happening usually is at the end of the, after you answer all the questions, and it says 1 left. Okay. 0. Great. I just wanted to show you what usually ends up, yeah. So here it then gives me which one of the 5 character traits that's most dominant and what's my most defining characteristic. It gives you a little bit of an explanation. And usually also what's been happening here is that it gives you ads that would have been sent to you if you were a voter in the United States based on that profile. So you kind of get a sense of what are the kind of advertisements and how that whole process worked. Yeah, I invite you to go in there and check it out. It's actually very interesting. A lot of people get into it. Great. I'm going to move on from here and start kind of talking about the second core theme that we looked at, which is exploring these issues, but a bit more in depth. And we looked at this area around fakes, in particular deep fakes, which are technologies which have been developed and now available, which allow you to digitally generate completely artificial video footage, just about anything you see around you, including and especially people, right? So we got two main exhibits in this area. One is called Deepfake Lab. Again, this was done by our partners in Milan. This is actually all the team members here introducing themselves through the video while they're putting deepfakes on themselves. I don't know if you can actually hear. It's on my audio, but you might not be able to hear. But basically, I'm going to go ahead and mute so I can. Yeah. So basically, what they're doing here is just showing you the process and the steps that you need to create a deepfake. And it shows you basically how to identify one and how it all works. And they kind of go into detail, some technical side there, but not too much. Actually, again, it's made for the average person to come in and just get a general idea of what's happening. So it's very cool. I would also recommend checking that out. And the second exhibit on this side, looking at deep futures, is what we're calling deep fakes is what we're calling deep future. And that really explores what this actually means, what all this means, and how we see ourselves and how we present ourselves in the future. And so what that means for our identity, but also what it means for how we want other people to see us, and really how as a society we're going to react to all of this. The fact that any kind of information we see in the digital sphere could actually be completely artificially generated, and we're posing all these questions to the visitor. And I wanted to show you the poster quickly, which was on this website that we were just on. I'm going to give it a second to load because this is that virtual website, the virtual exhibition that I had showed earlier. And on that, when you hover over either the tablets that are put on the table or the posters, you end up accessing all of the different pieces. So it's kind of important that this shows up right now. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, maybe until that happens, I'll also show you these videos, which is once you get on the virtual exhibition as well. I'm not going to actually show you the video, but this is a few animations that we put together, particularly for this Glass Room Misinformation Edition, and a series of 4 videos. One is about persuasive design. One is about trachography, profiling, living with algorithms, and they're short, like 3 or 4 minute videos that are easily consumed and gives you kind of an idea, opens your eyes to all of these different things that are happening. So those are really interesting to watch as well. And for some reason, this it's not working out for me here on the virtual exhibition, but maybe I can just quickly.
We think we're sending too much traffic out to it from all the people watching the stream.
Is that right? Okay. What I want to do right now is, I might just have to, let's just try and set up another browser. Here we go. Looks like that. Okay, great. So I hope you can see that now. It should be up there. So again, we quickly adapted to the COVID situation by throwing this up here and really trying to get this out in a reasonable amount of time. So these are all the apps that I just mentioned right now that we all kind of just checked out. So when you hover over and you click, it'll open up another tab. And I was talking about the deep future poster. So whenever you kind of hover over poster 2, you can open it up. It's quite simple. takes a little bit of time to load because it's pretty high resolution. And this is that poster that I was mentioning. And so it's got these 6 different pieces up here. You know, it's talking about your personality, your afterlife. And it talks about, you know, poses these questions and asks you, provokes you actually to think about these different topics, but then it kind of gives you like a real life scenario, right? So talking about Gmail Smart Compose and how basically it's forming, you know, part of your personality. How is that going to kind of turn out in the future as these technologies progress? But also talks about, you know, your speech and how that's coming in, yeah, your face in your memory, all of these different things. I invite you also to check it out. So I'm going to get into the last theme, just for interest of time here. The last theme was about basically this idea of addiction or habit forming behaviors, as other people might call it. And we have 3 pieces around that. We have this one, hooked. Are you hooked? And the third one is how your phone is designed to grab your attention. So maybe we can start with this one. This poster here is really, it was also actually in San Francisco. And it was actually designed, again, with the youth in mind, right? So like a lot of the techniques and methodologies used in persuasive design is meant for adults, but actually now being tweaked for like that younger generation. And we're talking about things like, you know, the typing bubble or the read receipt and all these things that we've become so accustomed to, but now just like really throwing it out here in kind of a concise space to see, hey, all of this is by design, right? So, you know, how it gives you FOMO and what the kind of techniques under that, or how it makes you feel like you're getting ahead, you know, with a, you know, the follower count, all of these things that we're probably a little bit aware of, and just like really putting it out there for a lot of people who maybe just, you know, start thinking about this, or even a younger age group, or even an older age group, right? So again, it's talking about you know, this concept of addiction, and we have this one over here too that was done by one of the students at Milan as well, in collaboration with Tactical Tech. And what she'd done here is taken a sample size of a group of people in China and basically measured their use and consumption of certain apps, and created this kind of infographic that you see in front of you based on the different age groups and those different categories. And as you can see here, the iris pretty much gives you the average amount of time that these people are spending on their phones. And then you can see the kind of density over here on the very left side where my mouse is, where the density of these, what do they call it? Capilla in the eyes, that kind of like on each category.
What are the categories? I can't quite read them.
Yeah, let me zoom in here. So we have things like, on the outside, we have reading and reference, productivity, entertainment, creative, social, and other. So these are the different categories. And then, so this was interesting, just kind of like infographic, just kind of to get an idea of what that sample size showed us. And we kind of built on this. And what we've done in the past with the other Glass Room editions, the IoT edition, we always like to have this interactive element, either on the digital or the analog side. So in the past one, we had this one where you kind of connect the dots, and in the end, it reveals like a message by Google's CEO, and it's, you know, it's really cryptic, but it was about the alphabet empire. That was the name of the poster. In this edition, we created another one based on this other poster that you just saw. It's called "Are You Hooked?" And actually, the idea was also to have a big poster, so when people come and visit, they kind of look through either on their Android or their iPhone. Both of the OSs have this feature now where you can look at your screen time. And then you can go up on here and kind of mark on the poster itself your own usage. And the idea was, after a while, to see, you know, through a group of like, I don't know, when we used to have events of like 100 people, you know, where the concentration, would it be on web surfing, chat apps, is it Facebook, or is it Instagram, or music? And then you can, you know, there's also the instructions here on the right side to fill that in. We've actually taken and done this digitally on a shared platform where people can actually mark, and it's really fun, and you actually end up gathering some kind of insight. We like to have everything anonymous, of course, So when you actually do that on our platform, we're using Big Blue Button a lot, and you actually see people's names, right? So we're just like, we're trying to consider how to do this with maintaining anonymity, and of course that goes for the same for all the other tools like the Ocean test, and all of that. Great. So the last thing that I wanted to show you here is the data detox kit. And if you click on it, it ends up opening this tab over here. And this is a really important element of the Glass Room. It's actually a different project. It's one of the four main projects of Tactical Tech right now, but it kind of goes hand in hand with the Glass Room. So basically we present all these concepts and people are like, okay, whoa. Some people are overwhelmed, some people are afraid, some people are energized. But everyone's asking, okay, what do I do now? I understand there's maybe a risk, something. I'm willing to change my behavior, but how can I go ahead and do this? And we've developed here the data detox kit, which is basically kind of a tips and tricks and a guide basically on certain things you can do to reduce your exposure. And of course, everyone's different and they have different kind of variables to consider. So we've done this one, which kind of focuses on privacy, security, and well-being. And so you kind of go in here and you have these like articles. I mean, it's like one page that you can open up, and it basically, something says here, change your device name. And it says, okay, if you're on the Android, these are the steps you can do, and these are for your iPhone. Here you can clear your location footprints. So there's a whole bunch of different like things that you could do to lower your exposure. It's been a great hit. A lot of people are really happy with it. And in this, for this edition, we added this article here, 6 tips to steer clear of misinformation online. But then there's always all kinds of, I'd like to add that we also did for the youth version, a data detox specifically designed for that 11 to 16-year-old age group. And then we've gone ahead and translated it into like 1 billion languages. They're all over here. So this, as I said, it's a big hit, and people from all around the world are contacting us to translate and to spread this to all of their communities. What else? I think for the most part, that's it. As I said, we're actually funded by the EU to do this misinformation project. So shout out to them and our partners for the International Federation of Library Associations. So we're working with a lot of librarians on getting this information out there. Despite all the challenges everyone's facing with this newest lockdown. And but it's probably going to keep on going well into next year, as a lot of people are contacting us definitely during Corona and all the misinformation that's been out there, trying to address it in any way possible. So I feel again, another invitation to check it out. And by the way, I didn't mention this one last bit. It would be really helpful if you guys, after you're done, if you click on this guy over here and it says feedback, and there's like literally like a 2-minute like evaluation form, it'll really help us out if you kind of give us an idea if you liked it or not, if it's relevant, if we need to change something. Just let us know. I think I'll stop for there.
Mohammed, thank you for the really powerful introduction. There's actually a whole bunch of stuff there. I didn't realize quite the breadth of what you've been working on. So thank you for sort of the whistle-stop tour. I actually have a bunch of comments and questions here, but I think that we need to prioritize them. I guess the detox is really good. Converting all this kind of slightly academic stuff into actions is a good start. How are you doing outreach for that? You started talking about librarians. Is that an effective outreach?
So actually, with this specific project, we were kind of looking at marginalized groups and the younger age group, and we kind of wanted to step out of our kind of regular kind of comfort zone, and all these people who actually are quite familiar with this. I mean, our ultimate goal is to really get out there as far as possible. Mm-hmm. So with libraries, initially they had this wider community that don't have much contact and this pretty good reach. But now with the COVID, they're facing a lot of difficulties with reaching them online. The whole idea was that it was offline physical space and that they could take advantage of. So now we're working with all kinds of different people to get it out there, including most recently with the film Social Dilemma, who put it up on their website, and we've been getting a whole bunch of traffic through that. So that's one way we've been working as well.
Nice, because that ironically that had a load of push from Netflix, who themselves use data in questionable ways. So that captures the circle quite nicely. I was keeping notes the whole time. Deepfakes are now getting so mainstream. An ex-colleague, not from Element, I should add, contacted me to show off his deepfake as a service website. And I said, "Oh, dude, I'm not interested in this." So yeah, that was slightly embarrassing. What do you think about the medium as the message? So you've gone from poster on the wall to tablet to an online environment. It's really hard to compare metrics between those formats, and especially with online, you're essentially telling them about the medium that they are currently on. So is there any concern, or as rewarding as it is to have converted everything to an online format, do you think that there's anything good to be comparing the metrics there?
Well, I mean, looking at metrics is also, I mean, it's important and everything, but from us, like the whole design, yeah, we do have to admit it was all about talking amongst one another in a physical format about digital topics and issues that we're facing. In the bigger one, you might have seen that picture briefly where we have a data detox bar in these larger exhibitions where we have ingeniuses that are behind the bar, much like, we're not emulating, we are mimicking a tech store, right? So people walk in, they're thinking they're going to buy something, they end up in the Glass Room and then like blown away with all of these things, and then they see the ingeniuses and they end up having this conversation with them. I can't tell you how many conversations we had in San Francisco where people were just like really pouring their heart out about, what they've been facing, we're talking to like Apple engineers who are telling us they're learning about these topics for the first time, right? But they work on facial recognition and they didn't realize the extent of it. So you see this, like, these moments of like clarity that just hits the individuals. And that's what we were looking for with these physical events. So there's pros and cons. Now that we're online, we've got this much wider reach, right? We're getting that bigger impact, but we might be missing some of that we had before. And it's just us now trying to adapt to what's really happening here. I have to say, I really did enjoy it. Go ahead.
Sorry. On the plus side, you're actually talking to people who on the medium that they are you're warning them about what they're using. So people coming into the stores, well, in San Francisco, a lot of people are techies. If you run that in random cities, the chances of getting people who are the least addicted people to tech then are quite high. So you may just preach someone who are not aware. So on the plus side, you may have a better target. But the conversations are surely, you're probably missing them.
Indeed. I mean, I have to say that we had quite a diverse group. I mean, even though it was the heart of Silicon Valley, and we had the Google security team stopping by. We had Tristan Harris, the creator of the film that we just mentioned right now, Social Dilemma. He would stop by. All these Apple techies. Actually, I would say maybe 50% of people were literally just walking by, as in a downtown, seeing an interesting kind of store where they thought they could purchase something, and just like getting sucked into all the different topics that were out there. And it was everything from misinformation to surveillance to privacy. I mean, it's quite a wide range of topics in the larger Glass Rooms. This one was more niche, right? It was about this specific topic of misinformation. But yeah, I mean, I invite you to check out the Glass Room website to get an idea of the other artists that have worked with us. So we did most of this, except for those ones that the students in Milan worked on. The large one, there was about maybe 25 objects by Tactical Tech, and then 25 other artists from around the world. I invite you to check out those exhibits as well.
Cool.
Looks great.
So there's, I'll have to forward this to you afterwards, but it sounds like there's people who want to engage and basically want to help you with repromotion, which relates to a final question, which I hope isn't too unfair. This is great for people who are receiving it. How do you target the people who need it but aren't receiving it? I'm thinking about the recent US election where the quality of information sharing was just at some of the lowest I've ever seen. And those people aren't getting your message. So how do we solve that?
Indeed. I mean, what we try to do is work with partners and partners. I mean, we're really focusing on how to maximize that impact and that reach. So far, again, we've diversified the kind of partners. So in the past, we used to go to a lot of tech events. Yeah, people were generally interested in tech. This year, we've been looking beyond that, not just libraries, but schools as well. We've been talking to people who can take it. I mean, of course, now people who have a large kind of online base, right? That can really get the message out there. So everything from people who used to do events on, maybe even startup events, right? As a matter of fact, a lot of these, again, we talked about Silicon Valley. A lot of the techies are not even aware of the issues and the impacts of their work on society. So we're going, we want to address this from the very beginning, right? As they're developing these products, right? So we go to these tech events, these entrepreneurship type events. We go to a lot of art events as well. We just try to diversify as much as possible.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, so you've got an offer here from the Toronto Public Library to run a virtual workshop there. I think we'll have to connect you with them after the fact. But Mohammed Radwan, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.
Cool. So next victim is Popi. Are you there?
Hey, I'm there.
How's it going?
Good.
Good. So we have you. You're a member of the Chatons network, which is an initiative it started by Framersoft, and we want to actually give a shout out to Framersoft because they this week released their live streaming PeerTube. So maybe in a near future version of this event, then we're going to see.
Oh, really?
We're going to see that. So yeah, I'm really excited about how much Framersoft are doing, and I wish that we could get some more English content.
They've been working also on Mobilizon last week. It came with all of how-to and a guide in English as well.
They did, and actually that's also really cool. And I think we're going to have them on Open Tech Will Save Us soon. That's only penciled. It's not in ink yet. But cool, Popi, I'll let you make your introductions and introduce Chatons.
All right. So I'm Popi. I'm a GNU Linux system administrator in life. I'm also part of a collective called Chaton. Gonna start with thanking the Matrix team to reach out on the Chaton forum and leave us the opportunity to try to spread awareness. Chaton is mostly a French hosting collective, but we would love to see a similar collective and endeavor to spread all over the planet. Really, that would be awesome. So I'm gonna get started and share my screen. All right. So I called it decentralizing is teamwork. The idea is mostly to present what Chaton is and also to take some time to present some of the challenges and success stories that the collective has been through in the last 4 years. Okay. Right. So Chaton in itself is an acronym. It's also a playful pun because Chaton in French means kittens, which immediately should relate to internet and or secret masters. Chaton means, if I translate it literally, it means a collective of alternative, transparent, open, neutral, and united hosters. The idea is to gather unlimited number of small online hosting entities around some shared values mostly the love, the unconditional love for free and open source software, and the need for a more ethical internet use and web browsing. It's also about promoting decentralization. The idea, it's really important to mention that it's mostly small hosting entities, because the idea is to see more of them, not to see the current one getting bigger. We have an official website for it. It's called chaton.org. It allows you to search for an alternative of a well-known service. It also gives you the results on a map and tells you which Chaton members are the closest one to your location. The idea is to find alternatives to the WebGen proprietary solutions. Voila. If we were to make an analogy, and which is one which is often used in the French presentation of Chaton, it's to compare basically the GAFAM to the agri-food industry behemoth. Then Chaton would be considered as local organic farmers with strong values, and basically holding by them, not having just official speech, no GMO, no pesticide, no aggressive marketing. We often compare them to what in France we call AMAP, which are organized in a network of associations supporting small farming. So no GMO and no pesticide or aggressive marketing can be easily translated into basically no proprietary software, no trackers, no advertisement. So it was initiated in 2016. It all started from Framasoft. Sorry, just a second. Yeah, all started from Framasoft after a 2-year campaign, which was called Degooglify Internet, where they promoted the free libre software alternatives to proprietary services by implementing those solutions and making them available for the general audience. The idea is to provide a whole range of services, and that goes from the usual file storage, email service, video, audio, streaming platform, microblogging, collaborative tools, which were very successful initially and contributed widely to the success of the campaign. But you can really extend it to anything: code repository manager, web hosting for people who want to host their websites on an ethical platform. There's no limit in the services that you offer, as long as you respect the values and the charter which is associated with it. The collective is, as of July 2020, we went from a handful of Chatons in 2016 to 76 Chatons. It's mostly in France. As I said, it's considered the French collective. There was a discussion about it in 2018, and it was decided to be only open, basically, or officially at least, to French-speaking members. I was the member in London initially, but I just relocated in July. Otherwise, we have some people in Belgium, and otherwise, really, the idea is to be all over the place. There is no specification on the type of structures. We are open to any kind. It just happened that we have a bit of a mix of everything, which is pretty cool. Mix of all sizes. Also, it all goes down to private individuals running basically a server at home with a strong, a fast internet connection to be able to provide typically some kind of host, which is a popular hosting solution where you can install services as some part of packages. So it requires a bit of a less of a system administrator profile. We're open to all solutions. Everybody is free to implement what he wants. There's really absolutely no requirement on that side. As long as it respects some very basic baselines, no advert, like I said earlier, no data monetization. We do not do any harvesting. No third party should be involved. We do not transfer data or metadata with anybody else. And no tech giant. This is mostly on the, it can be regarding the code, but otherwise it's mostly on the hosting side. The idea is to promote decentralization and differences, should I say. And so it's not to end up with everybody being hosted on AWS or Microsoft Azure, typically. We also only allow free and open source software exclusively from the operating system to the services. There is, of course, some exception that can be made regarding the firmware and things like that, which are not always open or rarely so. Otherwise, we ask for the members to use open standards, open protocols, open formats, to respect and enforce net neutrality. And the rest is just mostly about being polite with each other, being open, and with a benevolent approach. To become a chaton, so as long as you respect all those few points, which are lengthily redacted in our charter, you can apply to become a chaton officially. As long as you're ready, which means you are charter compliant, and yeah, you want to be part of the collective. You will basically, what we do is that we use repository Forge for that. We use a GitLab. It's not probably the most practical, but it was the first time and it was available at the time, and we haven't moved from that platform. It's a GitLab hosted by Pharmasoft. When we can, we do a proactive peer review of the applications, and otherwise, the voting takes place every 6 months. The application is reviewed by the community. We basically make a call for every member to come have a look at the application and provide a plus or minus 1 vote. There is only 1 vote per structure, whichever the size. And the decision is eventually made by a simple majority. Usually, people should be ready, but if they are not, we basically have about 2 to 3 weeks to vote. So if there is anything remaining, we basically try to engage and discuss with the applicant and try to fix whichever issues that we may have detected while. Basically, it's all standard checks, which is making sure that the terms of service are present, privacy policy, that they all respect the Chaton Charter, that the services are working. We just do some testing, and that there is a website which is clear and mentioned all the links, and that we don't detect any trackers while browsing. We have a manifesto and a charter. So the manifesto is a bit inspired by the Communist Manifesto, as you can see, if you ever read it. That was from the president of Pharmasoft initially, and from manifesto didn't move much. I'm not going to extend on that. We also have a charter which did move over time. It contains a mix of technical and social criteria. This is the main document that people who want to become a chaton have to basically study and make sure that they comply to. Among the points, you have to make sure that you have a comprehensible, easily understandable terms of service and privacy policy. Ideally, a code of conduct. It is said that you should have control over the underlying architecture, which de facto excludes AWS or similar services. You make a pledge that you will not own the data which is produced by your users, and you should also be open and trying to engage and meet your users whenever you can. The Chaton Charter and Manifesto have been translated. The charter, like I said, went through a second version, and this one hasn't been translated yet, just so you know. What else regarding the charter? Everything must be using open standards, reachable using open standards as well. Same degree of access, basically no QoS, net neutrality again. No targeted monitoring of your users' activity, no data harvesting. You can do analytics as long as it's reasonably anonymized and respectful, and that it's mentioned, of course. But now is basically a lot of things were before GDPR, but now GDPR is enforcing all of those. And it's also highlighted in the charter that we should keep a spirit of solidarity and awareness and openness as well. Basically, you should be there for your users, easily reachable, and contributing into the documentation and trying to open your documentation and your whole infrastructure as much as you can, really. The idea is that by sharing on the internet, you make it a common good, and it becomes available to anyone. Keeping the momentum after, so throughout the years, we, well, basically from a handful to 76, you gain some, you lose some. There has been a regular periodic concern about the level of engagement of the different members. Because we do realize that we end up running with some kind of a core of users, which is about 30-40% of all of the Chatons. It's not always the same. There is a bit of a rotation between those people, but it's a regular issue that as a collective we haven't fixed, or we have decided to not fix. We had discussion around it, but as I said, you have entity which are so different in sizes and numbers that it's really difficult to try to enforce any kind of rule for people to engage and participate. They already have to take care of their own structure. So it's really appreciated. That's more how we try to put it, organize and highlight the participation of members who are willing to help with the projects and the revisions, like the charter that I'll talk further later on. We should probably mention that we have a coordinator as part of the collective, which is Angie. She's part of the Framasoft Association. She's dedicating about 40% of her time to the collective, making sure that basically topics don't get abandoned over time. So sometimes just to bump it a little, help people to realize that things are still ongoing or haven't been fixed or need to be addressed. She has managed to delegate some of our activities, most notably the monthly meetings. Now it's organized by different members, not the same every time, not NG every time. Also about the housekeeping of the Chaton applications, which is, it's not much, but if you can get different members to participate, it's always a win. And then there is, of course, the representation and advertisement for Chaton in online and physical events, like I'm doing here today. I'm just one member of the Chaton collective, and many different members locally, because the idea of Chaton is also really to try to act locally. Will try to take part in any kind of events where they can promote the collective and their own structure. That's about it. What do we use as a collective? Nothing special, nothing magic. We have a forum. We have moved on from a mailing list in 2016 to a forum. It was much harder than expected, actually. because any change actually when you start getting big and you do want to let the people decide will always induce a lot of discussion. We consider it to be a healthy process, and eventually there is no hurry, no deadlines for the Chaton collective. We want to have the consensus on everything we decide. So the mailing list and the forum stayed alongside for about 2 years, but eventually we managed to move everybody to the forum, which can, it's a standard discourse. It can act as practically a mailing list. We have a wiki, it's just a docu-wiki for documentation, where we keep track of the evolution of the project and put some of our technical documentation resources. And the repository manager, which is used for the application and also to host source code for the different projects and our communication and media kit. About some of our success, and some of the most recent one was the entraidechaton.org initiative. This, I think this started from one of the Chaton members who suggested, as the lockdown was hitting, that we, as basically the Chaton, should be trying to do their part, and we were all willing to do our part. And somebody came with the brilliant idea to create a very simple portal where people from all over the place could come and through the click of a mouse reach to a specific freely accessible service on a random Chaton that would change every time you refresh the page. If I have time at the end, I'll show you, because it's still, well, we are in a new lockdown and still active. It was launched on 2nd of April. Eventually, it's pointing to 39 different Chaton members, and the statistics show that there were more than 28,000 beneficiaries. Again, reminding that we are small to very, very small structure. It's considered a big win for us. Among the other things that we managed to organize and get done was the revision of the charter. The original charter was nice, but it was containing a bit too many objectives. And what we realized is that practically nobody was managing to tick all the boxes. So after several months of discussion, we agreed on a new charter, which is making clear separation between what should definitely be required and what are recommended criteria. So this part hasn't been translated in English yet, but typically there used to be it used to be a requirement to publish the whole list of packages that are installed on all of your servers, and it was not always doable for everybody. So now it has become a recommended criteria. Among the other activities, there was MOOC, Chaton MOOC, that was organized. This was organized around Framasoft. It was really a Framasoft endeavor. But the idea behind it was to raise awareness, contribute again to raise awareness around the hegemony of the GAFAM and all the application it has. And so the first class was also to start introducing solutions, among them basically moving away to alternatives like Chaton. And in the upcoming projects, we on the forum, there was a team of moderators which has emerged as part of the write-up of a code of conduct, and to handle any kind of possible conflicts or crises that could arise on the forum. Like any collective, we represent many different individuals who have all their own character, and a system administrator is usually has quite a character. What else? There is a write-up of a startup guide I'd like to become a chaton. This is to help people preparing and to become a chaton. And they've created the tool to highlight the activities of the collective and its members at stats.chaton.org. Finally, the idea is really to focus. We, as a collective, are going steady, I would say. Even if there's still only a small amount of people at the monthly meeting, those are not always the same people, and it's rotating, and we get new people on board, and they get motivated, and they take part. So far, it is considered a success, and the more the merrier. As we are growing, we as our individual structure, we do contribute to raising the awareness on basically getting rid of the GAFAM, and for people to look into privacy respecting alternatives. We also use that as a bridge to introduce free and open source services, which is still not in the general audience knowledge, I would say. You still has to introduce what is free software to people. So Chaton, in a way, helps us to cross that bridge, because a lot of people are interested in alternatives, as Google and Facebook are sometimes helping us through their own project or affairs. We also basically try to do our part. So Chaton is limited to the French-speaking hosters. As I said, this was by design, but there is live hosters, which my structure is also part of, which is on a more international level and is carrying very similar values and expectations. They have met several times. I am not as involved in this collective as I would like to be. However, they are also they are very close to Chaton, and they have been working on their own charter based on the translation that was made from Chaton. So it's also about free and open source software first, and ethics and no data monetization and privacy forward. Finally, as a last word, I would say that since this is called Open Tech Will Save Us, I have absolutely no doubts that open tech, free and open source software is an absolute requirement, but that if we want an internet to be back to what it was, or to change from what it has become, we also need to get back into decentralization, centralization and ethics. Ethics is down to the people to also adhere to it, and for us to convince them. And decentralization is becoming more and more possible thanks to awesome projects like Matrix, typically on the instant communication. But I could we mentioned PeerTube at the beginning, which is decentralized federated video streaming. There is Funkwell for audio now. You have microblogging alternatives led by Mastodon, Pleroma, and the like. The ActivityPub the Matrix protocol suite are bringing concrete solution to an internet which can be back to decentralized, and where you don't have to be locked into one platform. And that's it. I think I'm done.
Whoop! Thank you, Popi. That's yeah, it's really educational. There are some questions. There's really two strands to questions, which are firstly, it's around some of your definitions of Libre, which I guess is probably a major chunk of your manifesto. So maybe this is topical for you because you've been working on V2. So let me put it in. This is as Bjorn's words. So he says, since I can't get a public IP in my own home, I pass all of my home server traffic through a DigitalOcean gateway. It handles very little, but the box is ultimately controlled by a large commercial company. So is that a tech giant or not? These are the kinds of gray areas and edge cases that people want to hear about, I guess.
Sorry, can you repeat his question?
So what is the meaning of Libra? How much of the stack needs to be Libra? You know, these kinds of things. He says that he passes his home server traffic through a DigitalOcean gateway because he needs a public IP address.
Okay.
So these kinds of points, I guess it's the minutiae of running a collective that this comes down to.
Yeah, and there is no not always a definite answer. But basically, the idea is to tend towards as free of anyone else as possible, which may and this shows in the collective because we have typically some people, they manage to self-host either at home or their association, their organization as a place somewhere in the city, and they're connected and everything. And this is basically what we all tend to. This is perfect. You hold your router, you have the IP address, you can get in touch with, we have the French Federation Data Network, which is an ISP. So you can even go through an Ethic ISP as well. And I mean, you can basically really tick all the boxes. Or you can, I don't know about Ocean because we don't, I don't know of any Chaton doing that specific scenario. Because usually you can ask for a public IP in France. But if you self-host and you go through a third party, I guess it could be accepted if it's only really as a relay, and if basically you set up some form of VPN between you and that traffic. But ideally, you should really be out of it, really. And but again, if it's blocked, for example, my Chaton is not hosted at home, and I'm using a service provider for it, which is which is based in Germany, the same one as Framasoft. And they have their own, so it's in a data center. I'm paying for a physical server on a monthly basis.
Right. Yeah.
And so I hold the whole stack on that server, but I don't control the router, and this is considered fine. It's really on trying to do as much as you can.
So one thing you said earlier on mentioned Unohost. Is that a compulsory part of the Chatons deployment?
No, absolutely not. I was giving Unohost as an example for the very small Chatons. But otherwise, the stack is, as long as it's open source, the stack is completely open. We have some people running Kubernetes clusters for the biggest ones. Framasoft itself is running on KVM, I think. I'm using LXC containers on Proxmox. It's really open. As long as it's open source, no worries.
Cool. And then the final point, there's been a lot of people saying thank you, by the way. The final point is the relationship with the countries. So Libre Hosters is something international. Chaton is deliberately French speaking. And we've got people in the comments saying, well, my organization would be perfect, but we're Danish. So where's the place for us? Should they be in contact with Libre hosters? And can you comment on what is the benefit of grouping by language?
Well, for Chaton, it's really about the organization, exchanging and debating. And many French people don't speak English, so they were seeing that as a threat for their own voice, basically, which I can understand.
Got it. Yeah.
If he's Dutch but he speaks English, I'm sure he does. Then LibreHosters is open. Really, we have members from Greece, I think, from Germany. We have the idea is LibreHosters is also very small at the moment, but they are really open. And as long as, again, you respect the ideals and and technically you implement it using only free software and user privacy and all, then they'll be open to you. And otherwise, if you can, if you know other people like that in Netherlands, then you can also try to create your countrywide collective, because that's actually a positive thing of it on Chatons, is that we managed to get several times in basically national papers because of the fact that it was a French collective. And so if you can get something nationwide, I think it can help to publicize it.
Yeah, I think you're right. So as it happens, this fellow's Danish, I think. But I mean, they'll speak as good English as the Dutch, sorry. I think. But yeah, it's an interesting point. So either getting involved with LibreHosters or leveraging the benefits that come with being slightly more niche by enforcing your own language. So yeah, that's an interesting point, and I wonder how that scales down, because obviously the population of Denmark in total is that much lower than France. They don't have the simple number of opportunities to form a collective in the same way. But I think your point is good, which is if you limit it to the language, then inherently you get more power within that organization.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure they have how do you say in English? I think it's LUG, Linux user groups.
Yes, yeah.
A lot of Chatons are basically Linux user groups that decided to open their own servers and take part of the collective. So that could be a start, really.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So there's already going to be infrastructure there, probably meetup groups and even makerspaces. All right, Popi, thank you, and thank you for keeping up the good work and fighting the good fight. You're providing a good service.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
So we move to our final speaker of the evening, coming to us live all the way from Canada. It's Hubert, who you will know as Uhoreg, whose name is a miniature tribute to his own kind of style and personality. I love it. Maybe you can explain that to people if they're interested in that. But you're going to talk to us about some of the latest thinking around encryption, and I'll let you introduce. You're doing the mute thing.
Sorry, I unmuted on my headset, but not on Jitsi.
Gotcha.
Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, I'm Hubert, and I'm on the Matrix spec core team, focusing on the encryption aspects of Matrix. And so I've entitled my talk A Brief History of End-to-End Encryption. So I'm going to basically go quickly through encryption and how we ended up where we are today, and then give a sneak peek at some of the things that are coming up. So in this talk, whenever I talk about encryption, it's going to be referring to end-to-end encryption. There's also what's known as transport encryption, which is basically if you're talking to someone through a server, then your messages are encrypted. Your messages to the server are encrypted, but then the server can decrypt it and then send it off to the recipient. End-to-end encryption is where the message is encrypted between yourself and the recipient. And so if there's any servers in between, then they can't read the message. So encryption has been around at least since the time of Julius Caesar. And the cipher that he is known for is basically what's known as a substitution cipher. And a substitution cipher is one in which each letter is substituted with another letter. In the case of the Caesar cipher, we replace each letter in the original message with the letter that comes 3 after it in the alphabet. So if we take the alphabet, at the time of Julius Caesar, it would have had 23 letters. And then we shift it over by 3. So we start with D. Then we replace A with D, B with E, C with F, etc. So if we take the standard pseudo-Latin placeholder text, lorem ipsum, written in a classical Latin way, with all capitals and a V instead of the U, then we look up here and L becomes an O, and O becomes an R becomes a V, and so forth. And then so the encrypted message becomes this. So apparently this must have been somewhat effective for Caesar, and the effectiveness was no doubt aided by the fact that most of his enemies would have been illiterate. So obviously if they can't read in the first place, then they won't be able to decrypt the message. In practice nowadays, substitution ciphers like that are easily defeated using a variety of techniques. One of them is what's known as frequency analysis. So if you take any text in a language, for example, English, then some letters will appear more frequently than others. And in fact, in most languages that use a Latin-based alphabet, the letter E will be the most frequent. So if you take an encrypted message that's been encrypted using a substitution cipher, and then you just count how many times each letter appears, then the letter that appears most frequently will probably be an E if the message is long enough. So if we skip forward several centuries, then people have developed more sophisticated ciphers. Two of them that I want to point out in particular are called the Vigenère and the Playfair cipher. These two ciphers are named after people that they were not invented by. So the Vigenère cipher was invented in the 1950s by Belasso, and it was not broken until the mid-1800s. And the idea behind that is you use the substitution cipher that was used by Caesar, but instead of always substituting the same letter with the same other letter, you also have a key. And then you do the substitution based on the key. So if you have the message lorem ipsum, by this time we've invented lowercase letters, and we've also invented the letter U. You also have a key. In this case, I'm using the key ABC. If your key is shorter than the message, then you just repeat it each time. And then you have a lookup table that tells you what letter you replace the letter from the message with, depending on what key you have. So the way the Vigenère cipher worked is if the key is A, then you end up replacing the letter with itself. If the key is B, then you replace it with another letter. If the key is C, then you replace it with another letter. So as I mentioned, this was quite an effective cipher at the time, and it wasn't broken for over 300 years. The next cipher I wanted to mention is called the Playfair cipher, which was developed in the 1850s by Wheatstone. And the idea behind this one is that instead of replacing individual letters, you replace letter pairs. So if, for example, in lorem ipsum, you would replace the letter O, the letters LO with some other pair of letters, and then RE with some other pair of letters, and so forth. Finally, aside from substitution-based ciphers, there's also what's known as transposition ciphers, where instead of changing letters, you change the positions of letters in some way. So for example, if we decide to take pairs of letters and just swap their positions, then in lorem ipsum, then the LO becomes OL, RE becomes ER, and so forth. Now, what I think is interesting is that some modern encryption algorithms are essentially combinations of all of these ideas put together, but done in more complicated ways. For example, the encryption algorithm known as AES does this. So it does a substitution based on your key. It does substitutions based on groups of letters, and it does some sort of rearrangement, and it does this a number of times. And we've actually found that these methods are quite effective. So what we've seen so far is known as symmetric encryption, which means that anyone who can encrypt the data can also decrypt. If you have the information that you need to encrypt it, you can also decrypt it. So for example, if Alice, Bob, and Carol are sending messages to each other, then they can share a single encryption key. And then so they just need to encrypt the message with the key, send the encrypted message to the other participants, and then the others can decrypt it. However, if Alice and Bob want to share messages with each other, but they don't want Carol to be able to read the message, then they can't use the same key. They need to figure out their own key. And likewise, if Bob and Carol want to send messages to each other, or if Alice and Carol want to send messages to each other. So in that group of 3 people, if you want to have all different combinations of sending messages, then you'd need to have 4 different keys. So in the 1970s, people came up with what's known as asymmetric encryption, also known as public key encryption. Now, it was secretly discovered by the GCHQ, which is one of the government organizations in the UK in the 1970s. And since we're talking about secret government organizations, you know, who knows, maybe some other government organization in some other country also discovered it. But this is the one that we know about. It was publicly discovered by Diffie and Hellman a few years later. And it's based on operations, mathematical operations that are easy to do in one way, but hard to reverse. So for example, it's easy to multiply 2 numbers to get another number, but it's hard to, if you're given one number, figure out what its factors are. So the idea here is that Alice has a private key, which she keeps private. She doesn't share with anyone else. And that private key matches with a public key, which she basically tells everyone. And then so if Bob and Carol want to send a message to Alice, then they can use her public key and encrypt the message and then send the message. And then only Alice can read it because she has the private part of that key. So even though Bob and Carol both are able to encrypt the message to Alice, they can't read the message that the other person encrypted. So if Alice, Bob, and Carol are in a group with each other, they want to share messages with each other, then each person just needs to encrypt their message using the other two public keys and then just send it to both of the other people. And then if Alice and Bob want to share messages with each other, then Alice just needs to encrypt her message with Bob's public key and vice versa. And Carol won't be able to read the message. So nowadays, cryptographic operations are more than just for encryption. There are different types of things that cryptographic operations can do for us. So in addition to encryption, they can be also used for establishing the authenticity of a message. So they can be used, for example, to make sure that a message was sent from a certain person. So the symmetric version of that is called a message authentication code. And so the symmetric version is where both participants have access to a shared key. And the asymmetric version of that, where there's a public part of the key and a private part of the key, is called a message signature. There's also a version where there's no key involved, which is called a hash. And another thing that we can do is to derive new keys. So, for example, if two people share a key, but they want to generate a new key for some use, whatever reason, this is called a key derivation function. And the public key version of that, which is where, for example, two participants have each their own public and private keys, and they share the public keys with each other. And then from that, they generate a new key. That's called a key agreement. And oftentimes, a key agreement is just called a Diffie-Hellman because that's usually the operation that's used. So in the 1990s, a guy named Phil Zimmerman created a program called Pretty Good Privacy, or PGP. And it was one of the first encryption programs intended for use by the general public. I don't know if it was the first one, but it was definitely the most well-known one. And surprisingly, the US government did not like this. They didn't like people having access to strong encryption. And in fact, they decided that strong encryption, if it was provided from the US to people outside of the US, it was considered as munitions export. And it was strictly controlled. So the US government open an investigation against Phil Zimmerman. And one of the ways that Phil Zimmerman tried to get around the export controls was by publishing the source code for PGP as a book. The logic being that a book is not a munitions, it's speech, and so would be protected under the United States' First Amendment. Now, eventually, the government closed their investigation against Zimmerman without filing any charges. But as we all know, the government and governments around the world generally do not like encryption, as you may have seen in recent news. So the idea behind PGP is it makes use of public key encryption. So each user has a public and a private key pair for encrypting and signing. Now, PGP can use different algorithms. So for some of them, it uses a different key pair for encrypting and signing. Some of them, it uses the same one. In either way, each user has their own key pairs. So if Alice wants to send a message to Bob, Alice can encrypt it using Bob's public encryption key, and then she can sign it with her own private signing key. And then when Bob receives the message, then Bob decrypts it with his private encryption key so he can read the message, and he also verifies the signature with Alice's public key so that he knows that it came from Alice. So that was this is great. It gives people the ability to communicate with each other, and it allows them to verify that the message was not tampered with. But let's take a step back from this and see what do we actually want from encryption. So what we can do is we can consider what would happen if Alice and Bob were to have a private conversation in person. So some of you may remember having in-person conversations with other people. This would have happened probably before March of this year. So if Alice and Bob have an in-person conversation, they meet in person, go into a room, close the door, and so no one else can hear them. So two things that they get from being in a closed room with each other are confidentiality and authenticity. So confidentiality means that no one else can listen in on their conversation. Authenticity means that they know that what they hear from the other person actually came from the other person. So when Alice tells Bob something in that closed room, then Bob knows that Alice actually said that, and it wasn't some random person pretending to be Alice. And Bob knows this because he knows that Alice and Bob are the only people in that room. So PGP gives us this through encryption and signatures. But there are a couple of things that PGP does not give us. One of them is that if Alice tells something to Bob using PGP and she signs that message, then Bob now has proof that Alice said that, and he can basically send that message on to anyone else, and prove cryptographically that Alice actually said that. And so that could be used, for example, to blackmail Alice if Alice was trying to tell him some confidential information. And so this presents a bit of a challenge where you want to be able to know that the message came from another person, but not be able to prove that to someone else. And that actually turns out to be fairly easy to do. One of the ways to do that is, instead of using message signature, so if we go back to this table, instead of using a message signature, you use a message authentication code using a shared key, which both Alice and Bob know. And so if Bob receives a message that's authenticated using that message authentication code, then he knows that it could only have been produced by someone who knew the shared key. And since he knows that only two people, either him or Alice, knows the key, and it wasn't him who sent the message, then he knows it came from Alice. However, if he then turns around and tries to give that message to someone else and say that, Alice sent me this message, then he can't prove that he wasn't the one who sent that message, because he also has access to that shared key, so he could have created that message authentication code as well. So that's one thing that PGP does not give us, that some of the later protocols give us. Another thing that PGP does not give us are these things: forward secrecy, backward secrecy, and post-compromised secrecy, security, sorry. And basically, the way you can think about this is, if Alice and Bob are in this room and they forget to lock the door, and then Carol just randomly wanders into the room, not knowing that Alice and Bob are in there, or maliciously, and she hears Alice and Bob talking to each other. And so if Carol walks into that room and hears a message, and then later on walks out, then the question is, how much of that conversation is Carol able to actually access? So in a real life private conversation, obviously, if Alice and Bob are talking to each other, Carol walks in and then leaves, then Alice and Bob can decide to lock the door and then make sure that Carol can't walk in anymore and read any of the other messages. What happens with PGP, however, is that if Carol, for whatever reason, gains access to Alice and Bob's private keys and is able to read a single message that was sent, then, since all the messages are encrypted using the same key, then she can actually read all the past messages and all the future messages that were sent between Alice and Bob, which is obviously not good. It would be kind of like if Carol walks into the room, hears a message, and then walks back out, then even if Alice and Bob lock the door after Carol walks out, Alice or Carol can walk in and out of the room at will, even though the door is locked. So forward secrecy and backward secrecy and post-compromise security basically refer to which parts of the conversation can Carol read after she's walked in on the conversation. So can she read messages that were sent after she walks in? Can she read messages before she was walked in? Can she read all of the messages? So in 2004, there was a protocol called Off the Record, or OTR. And then in 2013, there was the Double Ratchet protocol, which is used by Signal and others. And they give us these properties, more or less. Double Ratchet OTR gives us deniability, and some of the others, Double Ratchet gives us all of these. So Double Ratchet is used by Matrix in what we call the OHM protocol. So Off the Record and Double Ratchet basically assume that there's only two participants. And in particular, there's only two devices that are having a conversation. So for example, Alice is on her laptop and Bob is on his tablet. Now, we don't want to be constrained to just two devices. We want to be able to chat on, for example, our laptop and a phone. And we also don't want to have it constrained to be just between two people either. We want to be able to talk with multiple participants. So one way to do this is to pretend that we're in multiple one-to-one rooms. And so, for example, if Alice is in a group with Bob and Carol, then when Alice sends a message, then she basically encrypts it and sends it once to Bob and then once to Carol. And then likewise when Bob sends a message to the group, or when Carol sends a message to the group. Now for small groups such as for small groups like 3 or 4 people, that probably works fairly well. But when you get to hundreds or even thousands of people, that works less well. So protocols such as Matrix's MegaOhm try to be more efficient. So the way Matrix works is that there is a MegaOhm session, which is basically a single ratchet. And I'm not going to go into the details of cryptographic ratchets, but basically a ratchet is something where it's easy to move forwards in time, but hard to go backwards in time. So messages are encrypted using the MegaOhm ratchet. And the MegaOhm ratchet is something that is used to encrypt the message that's sent to the room. But then the MegaOhm session, the information to derive the keys is sent using OHM, which is a double ratchet between different devices. So when Alice sends a message to Bob and Carol, then she encrypts it using the MegaOhm ratchet and sends that message once. But then she sends the private information about the MegaOhm ratchet once to Bob and once to Carol. And then when she when she sends subsequent messages, then she advances the MegaOhm ratchet to encrypt the message. Bob and Carol do the same, and they can decrypt the message. Now, when we went from PGP to off the record and double ratchet, we lost some things. So as I mentioned, conversations target specific devices. And so if we go to multiple devices, then we lose some things. For example, when we open a new device, then we've lost the ability to read encrypted messages that were sent before we logged in on that new device. So whereas in PGP, all you had to do was copy your private key onto a new device and you could read everything, we don't have that anymore. So in Matrix, we've tried to address that using key backup and key sharing. Key backup is where the encryption keys are backed up, encrypted onto the server. And then so when you open a new device, you can fetch the backup from the server, decrypt it using a secret key, and then read messages. Key sharing is where you ask your other devices for the keys. Another thing that we've lost is that we can't receive encrypted messages if you don't have a logged in device. And so what we're doing in Matrix to try to address that is called device dehydration, which is just something that we've come up with, we came up with the idea a while ago, but we finally implemented it a couple of months ago. It's experimental still. So if you're on Element develop, then I think there's a labs flag that you can turn on to try it out. The idea behind a dehydrated device is that you sort of create a fake device that you store, again, encrypted on the server. And then when you log in a new device, instead of creating a brand new device from scratch, you take that dehydrated device from the server and you use that. So then you're able to receive messages that were sent basically to that dehydrated device. And so these things all provide a security trade-off between, since, for example, key backup and device dehydration store things encrypted on the server. Obviously, if someone is able to get access to the server and decrypt the data. So for example, if you used a weak password to encrypt it, then they are able to read old messages. However, it provides some usability for the user. So yeah, as I mentioned, right now we are doing group messaging by basically pretending we're in a bunch of one-to-one rooms. However, and that sort of works, but it doesn't really, it has some problems with it. So what we want from group messaging, obviously, is efficiency. So we don't want to have to encrypt the same message to all, 4,000 people in the same room. That's just not efficient. It takes a lot of time to do that. Another thing that we don't have right now in group messaging is membership authentication. So in the case where it was just Alice and Bob talking to each other, it was just two people. And, so it's easy to say, Alice knows that she's talking to Bob, Bob knows that she's talking to Alice. But then if Alice and Bob and Carol are trying to talk to each other, then they sort of have to know that they need to know who's in the room. So, for example, we don't want Alice and Bob to be talking to each other, and Alice thinks that Carol is in the room, but Bob doesn't know that Carol is in the room. So he might say something to Alice and that he doesn't really want Carol to know, but because Alice thinks that Carol is in the room and she saw Bob send the message to the room, she might think that Carol already knew that information. And then so maybe later on, she's talking privately with Carol, and then she mentions this information, which Carol wasn't supposed to know, but she thought that Carol already knew. So that could be a problem. We do want to be able to know who's in the room and receiving messages. So these are solved by MOS, which stands for Messaging Layer Security, which is an upcoming IETF standard. It's just entered the 10th draft, and it's in sort of final call. And so we are looking at how to integrate that with Matrix. One of the problems with MOS as it is that it doesn't work very well in a decentralized situation. So obviously we need to figure out how to make it work decentralized so that we can fit it in with Matrix.
Hubert, is that
Yep.
Is all the pressure on the Matrix side there in order to make that happen, or is there some adaptation that can be done to the MLS proposal?
So as far as I can tell, Matrix is the only one who's interested in decentralized MLS from a practical standpoint. So some of the other authors, some of the MLS authors have expressed interest in it from an academic standpoint, but I think we're the only ones who are actually trying to make it work practically.
Yeah, okay, which puts the pressure on the Matrix side then, because we're the most invested. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. So that's basically it for my talk. There are a whole bunch of issues that I have not talked about, such as key verification. So when Bob gets Alice's public key, how does he know that it's actually from Alice and not from some random other person? So Matrix has a key verification system, which obviously I'm biased, but I think it's pretty good. There are ways that it can be improved, but what we have, I think, works pretty well. There's moderation and abuse management, which is an interesting one. So, for example, if someone enters an encrypted room and then starts sending nasty messages, then the room moderator can may be able to kick them out, but in some cases they may want to get the user banned from the service. So they may issue a complaint to the service provider. But since the room is encrypted, the service provider may not be able to verify that the user actually sent that message. So how can we support that? And there are ways to do that. It's a bit tricky. It's an area of ongoing research. Last thing I want to mention is metadata protection. So if Alice and Bob are in a room together having a conversation, no one can see when Alice sends a message, when Bob sends a message, or sorry, if they're in a room, no one can see when Alice says something or when Bob says something, they can't see how much Alice says, how much Bob says. However, right now in Matrix and in many other services, the service provider or anyone who is able to view the room can see that information. And there's actually, you can tell a lot about conversations from what happens just by looking at that information. So there are ways to protect that. But yeah, I haven't mentioned anything about that. So
thank you, Hubert. There's a huge talk. We've got a couple of questions. Oh no, you hadn't finished. Sorry.
Yeah, I will just leave this comic up while I answer questions.
Let people read that at the same time. So I'm going to jump the queue because we're still talking about it. Ian Preston says MLS doesn't work in a federated setting because it requires a global order on messages. How does Matrix plan / hope to get around this? It says Piergos is also very interested in a decentralized MLS practically.
Okay. I have not heard of Pyrgos before.
Yeah, I don't
but I will look them up. So yeah, basically the idea is that so MLS, the way MLS works currently is you have different epochs, and they're sort of in a linear order. So you start with epoch 0, and then when someone updates the state of the group, MLS uses a tree as a data structure. When someone updates the tree, then you move to epoch 1, and then epoch 2, and so forth. So what we are looking into is that instead of having a linear order of epochs, we sort of allow for forks, which is similar to the way that the Matrix conversations, the Matrix conversation model is, where the conversation can fork and then it eventually converges to something. So we want to try to allow forks in the MLS state, and then resolve the forks in some way so that eventually we get to a consistent state.
Okay, I'm not going to pretend that I understood the whole thing, but the thing is, I think, and this is a common topic in encryption research and study, is that you have to have so much baseline knowledge to be able to understand the new proposal. But yeah. Thank you for.
I will eventually put up a blog post or some documentation once I've figured it out. I'm in the process right now of implementing MLS, and then once I have that, I'm going to try out different ideas. I have some ideas that look promising, but I want to try them out in an actual MLS setting. So I will write something up at some point once I have more concrete information.
So there's we're really getting pushed for time, so I'm just going to ask one more question. Where does O-memo fit into this whole thing? Asks Alexandra. As I understood, this is like OLM or MEGOM for XMPP, but maybe there's something more to it than that.
Yeah, it's basically I think it's just OLM for XMPP. I don't think they've adopted MEGOM, but it's basically the XMPP version of the double ratchet.
Right, so it's just the double ratchet.
Yeah, I believe so.
And whereas without MEGOM, then you're losing what, in a sentence?
You're losing some efficiency, basically.
Okay.
So basically with just the double ratchet, you need to encrypt each message for each recipient.
All right, so I'm going to going to not decipher that. Sorry, Holger. We'll come back to that later. All right, Hubert. Thank you so much. Thank you for explaining the nature and history of cryptography and making a real strong effort to get us up to date. I know that we will have a lot more reading to do. I want to wrap it up now and say thank you to all our speakers. Thank you. Oops.
Thank you.
Oh. Sorry. So I want to say thank you to Mohammed, thank you to Poppy, and thank you to Hubert. Bye now.
Thanks. Bye.